You ever had a day so bad you decide to spend your life savings on something totally unnecessary? Me neither. But Karen? Karen made me do it. Right now, I'm sipping a lukewarm generic beer, the kind you buy in a suitcase, not a 4-pack, while staring at 50 feet of pure, unadulterated, bulletproof glass where my perfectly normal 3-foot-tall wooden fence used to be. And guess what? She paid for it. Not directly, of course. That would require self-awareness, and Karen's tank has been running on empty since about 2008. But we'll get to the financing later. The bulletproof part? Yeah, that's not really for safety. It's for spite. The most expensive, high-definition, totally transparent spite money can buy. Let's rewind 6 weeks. Picture the scene. Suburban USA. Hot, humid, and deeply, desperately beige. I, Alex, owned a house built in the optimistic 1980s. The backyard was basic, a worn patch of grass, a rusty grill, and a fence. Just a regular, pale wood fence, maybe 3 feet high, perfectly legal, perfectly low maintenance, perfectly forgettable. It was the definition of exists. Then there was Karen. Karen lives in the massive, slightly too tall McMansion behind me. She paid a premium for her lot, which she constantly reminds people, specifically because it supposedly offered a $1 million view. Now, I need to break down this view for you. What did this $1 million vantage point actually encompass? The local Denny's sign, the one that's missing the Y, and sometimes flickers. A large, dusty electrical substation, beautifully framed by high-voltage warning signs. My backyard. Specifically, my fence. Karen purchased the view, and when I, a mere mortal in a much smaller house, dared to exist within the frame, she lost it. The fence, which had been there for a solid 10 years before she moved in, suddenly became a monstrosity. Her initial correspondence was a masterpiece of passive aggression, delivered via a crisp, scented envelope slid under my door. To the homeowner at 123 Elm. While I appreciate that you, too, wish to maintain the aesthetic integrity of our esteemed neighborhood, the vertical obstruction currently separating our properties presents a significant degradation to the natural light flow and, frankly, ruins the uninterrupted visual harmony from my second-story sunroom. I trust you will handle this matter with the utmost expediency and good taste. A concerned neighbor and HOA board member. I taped that note to my refrigerator. Vertical obstruction. Seriously? It was wood and stood up straight. I ignored it. That was my first mistake. My second mistake was underestimating the sheer force of misplaced neighborhood fury. Karen escalated. She started planting bamboo on her side, the invasive kind, hoping it would engulf my fence in a green, organic menace. I responded by simply trimming the bamboo back to the fence line, offering her the clippings back in a tastefully decorated compost bucket. She hated that. The final, over-the-top confrontation happened 3 weeks ago, right on the property line. I was trying to grill a single, lonely hot dog. She stormed over, wearing yoga pants that looked like they cost more than my entire outdoor furniture set. "Alex," she said, using that tone that implies your name is synonymous with unscrupulous peasant. "This has gone far enough. My lawyer is already drafting documents." "For what, Karen? The crime of having wood?" I flipped my hot dog. The sizzle was the only sound of sanity left. "It blocks the vista. It compromises the resale value of my property. You need to take that eyesore down immediately, or replace it with something—" She paused, searching for the most condescending adjective possible. "Something transparent. Something that respects the line of sight. Something like, "Glass, if you had the decency to invest in the neighborhood." She straightened her posture, clearly thinking she'd delivered a legal checkmate. "If you can't afford a decent fence, replace it with glass." And right there, next to a sputtering grill and a rapidly defrosting hot dog, the idea hit me. It wasn't just a light bulb moment. It was a 1,000-watt stadium floodlight moment, complete with the announcer screaming, "Let's get ready to rumble!" I looked at the perfectly infuriated face of Karen, the woman who had made my life a miserable 6 weeks of subtle sabotage. I put down my beer. "Transparent, you say?" "Yes, if you must have a boundary, at least make it subtle," she huffed. I smiled, a slow, terrifying grin that probably made me look like the villain in a forgotten 80s teen comedy. "You know what, Karen? That's a brilliant idea. Consider your view. Upgraded." She walked away, smugly satisfied that she had finally won. What she didn't realize was that I was not just going to install glass. Oh no. I was going to install 50 feet of triple laminated ballistic-grade Class 5 bulletproof glass, the kind they use in banks, the kind that can stop an assault rifle, the kind that, when installed between 2 suburban homes, serves absolutely no logical purpose except to fulfill a very specific, expensive, and deeply satisfying form of revenge. I was broke, but I was about to be happy. The war had just begun, and my weapon was transparency, and maybe a little bit of petty debt, so I had a plan, a glorious, petty, and fiscally irresponsible plan. I was going to buy Class 5 ballistic glass. Now, the thing about Class 5 ballistic glass is that it is not available at your local Home Depot, nestled between the lattice panels and the prefab shed kits. It turns out, that stuff is reserved for places where people keep the kind of money I was about to spend on a fence. I opened up Google, typed "bulletproof glass 50 feet," and immediately got served ads for private security firms and maybe a few places that specialized in custom panic rooms. My bank account started weeping hysterically before I even hit enter. My initial phase was the hunt, and let me tell you, it was a jungle out there. I didn't just need a window pane. I needed a translucent, defensive fortification that separated my rusty grill from Karen's award-winning petunias. This required talking to people who didn't understand the concept of a humble suburban grudge. I started with the locals, just to test the waters of sanity. I called Sam's Dependable Fencing and Decking. Sam showed up in a truck that looked older than my mortgage, chewed tobacco, and seemed to be allergic to shoes. "50 feet of what now, son?" Sam asked, wiping his brow with a greasy rag. "Bulletproof glass," I repeated, trying to sound as casual as if I was ordering a pizza. "Triple laminated, minimum half-inch thick. Needs to be about 6 feet tall." Sam actually stopped chewing. He stared at me, then at Karen's mansion, then back at me. "Look, I can get you cedar. I can get you vinyl. I can even get you one of them chain-link jobs if you're trying to breed Dobermans. But glass?" I explained Karen's demand, using the exact phrase architectural transparency, just to hear how stupid it sounded out loud. Sam scratched his head. "I appreciate the humor, I really do, but that much glass weighs about 400 pounds per section. You'd need footings deep enough for a skyscraper. And the cost? Forget the bullets. That thing is going to stop your entire retirement plan." I pressed him. "But if you could?" "If I could," Sam sighed, putting his hands on his hips, "I wouldn't be building your neighbor's grandmother a lattice screen for her cucumbers. I'd be building the new Vegas casino. Son, this isn't a fence. This is a bank vault that you can see through. My quote is, get a new neighbor. Or maybe a taller hat. Quote to $0. List of things Sam actually said. You trying to open a drive-through aquarium? That much glass weighs more than a small whale, even if it's clear. Your wife know you're using the college fund on spite. I don't have a wife, which made that last one even funnier. Next, I went completely in the opposite direction and called a high-end security firm based out of the city, the kind that advertises with tiny black helicopters and promises discreet, elite protection. A man named Julian arrived. Julian wore a suit that probably cost more than my car, spoke in a hushed, intense voice, and immediately started looking at the sky, presumably for drones. "Mr. Alex," Julian murmured, leaning close, his voice a gravelly whisper. "I understand you're experiencing a situational threat." "No, I'm experiencing a Karen," I corrected. "I just need a glass fence that can stop well, anything really. It's for aesthetic spite." Julian ignored the last part entirely. He began pacing the property line, nodding gravely, as if confirming the existence of a clandestine enemy. For 50 feet of perimeter defense at this classification, we wouldn't just install the paneling. That's a structural weak point. He pulled out a tiny laser pointer and aimed it at Karen's sunroom. We'd integrate a fiber optic intrusion detection system, a few ground-level pressure plates, and frankly, for that level of visibility, I'd recommend a low-level pulsed energy frequency barrier. It won't harm anyone, but it will make unauthorized viewing highly uncomfortable. I stopped him. "So, you want me to turn my backyard into a laser-fenced prison camp just because a woman complained about my lumber selection?" "It's not a prison camp, sir," Julian corrected, offended. "It's a deterrence zone. Our quote also includes a personalized, armored watchtower disguised as a gazebo. The glass alone will be in the mid-5 figures. The full deterrence package is only slightly less than the mortgage on that house you're trying to spite." I thanked Julian, who then gave me a card featuring a silhouette of a masked man descending a rope. Lesson learned: asking security experts for a decorative fence is like asking a Navy SEAL to help you wallpaper your bathroom. Overkill is their baseline. I was about to give up and just move to Antarctica when I found Glass Gary's custom structural applications. His website looked like it was designed in 1998, featuring a terrifying, pixelated image of a man with a mullet standing next to a hot rod. Perfect. Gary showed up on time. He didn't ask questions about why I needed a bulletproof wall between two quiet, suburban yards. He just looked at the property line, pulled out a notepad, and squinted into the sun. 50 feet, he mumbled. "Need 6 panels, 12 by 6 minimum. You want class 5, you're talking 3 layers of polycarbon glass, laminated with the good stuff." "How thick?" I asked. He looked up, one eyebrow raised. "How thick you need it to be to make a statement. We got the 1 inch, stops most pistol rounds. We got the 1.5 inch, stops the fun stuff. You got a specific threat profile?" "My only threat profile," I said, leaning in conspiratorially, "is my neighbor's smug satisfaction." Gary finally smiled, a genuine, slightly unsettling smile. "Ah, you want the spite special. We'll go 1.5 inch. I can get you a deal on some panels that were ordered for a dispensary redesign, but the client went with a cheaper option. Their loss, your petty victory." The quote. The price was still astronomical, but Gary offered a payment plan that essentially meant draining my emergency fund, taking out a loan I promised myself I'd never touch, and living on ramen noodles for 6 months. But the revenge? Priceless. I shook his hand. "When can you start?" "Tomorrow," Gary said. "It's a 2-day job. Day 1 is footings and steel supports. Day 2 is the glass. You'll need a crane." The next 2 days were a blur of organized chaos and bewildered neighbors. Day 1. Gary's crew, a collection of silent, tattooed men who looked like they specialized in bank heists, not home renovations, arrived with a compact cement mixer. They spent 8 hours digging trenches and pouring rebar-reinforced concrete footings. They were sinking foundations deep enough to hold a statue of an elephant, all for a fence that was supposed to be subtle. Karen watched all day from her sunroom, still smiling. She thought I was installing a stylish, low-profile, decorative glass screen. She probably imagined something tasteful, like the side of a fancy office building lobby. Day 2. The main event. The street was briefly closed off. The sound of the diesel engine from the crane, yes, a full, honest-to-goodness construction crane, could be heard in 3 zip codes. The glass panels arrived on a flatbed truck, wrapped like enormous, expensive gifts. They weren't light. They were terrifyingly heavy. I stood in my yard, watching this operation, feeling like a truly unhinged megalomaniac. The neighbors gathered on the curb, taking pictures. One old guy, Mr. Henderson, actually brought popcorn. Comedy of errors. The first panel got stuck halfway up, swaying gently in the suburban breeze, looking like a giant, dangerous, translucent sail. One of Gary's guys shouted a truly elaborate curse word in a language I didn't recognize when he dropped a wrench. The crane operator, a guy named Tiny, who was built like a refrigerator, kept asking if I was building a greenhouse or a witness protection unit. But slowly, painstakingly, the structure went up. 6 massive sheets of 1.5-inch thick, ballistic-grade glass bolted into deep concrete footings and held aloft by heavy-duty steel posts that were themselves hidden behind decorative, non-bulletproof covers. The result? It was majestic. It was absurd. It was so transparent that if you weren't standing directly next to it, the fence simply disappeared. 50 feet of boundary, yet somehow, nothing was actually blocked. The Denny's sign, the electrical substation, the entirety of my perfectly average backyard, all were now on crystal-clear display. It was less a fence and more a gigantic, immovable trophy case for my mundane existence. I was wiping dirt off my patio chair when the squeak of a screen door announced Karen's arrival. She had finally descended from her sunroom to perform her official review. She stopped dead on her lawn, exactly where the original fence used to be. She took 3 steps closer, then stopped again. Her face, which had been set in a pre-programmed smirk of satisfaction, slowly collapsed. She must have expected thin, decorative panels, something fragile, something subtle. Instead, she was staring at a wall that looked like it could withstand a small geological event. The steel supports, though covered, hinted at the sheer weight of the structure. She ran a hand along the surface, the smooth, thick surface, and it hit her. What is this?" she whispered, her voice finally breaking its usual register of entitled command. I walked up to my side of the glass, placing my hand flat against the cool surface. The bulletproofing worked both ways. I couldn't hear her well, but I could see her perfectly. "This, Karen," I announced, loud enough that Mr. Henderson across the street probably heard me, "is precisely what you asked for, a transparent boundary. But it's enormous. And that thickness, why is it so industrial?" I tapped the glass lightly with my knuckle. Thunk. "Oh, that? That's the triple laminated security glass. You know, for neighborhood safety. I wouldn't want, say, a rogue baseball or, a stray high-caliber projectile accidentally shattering your uninterrupted visual harmony. She looked at me, her eyes finally registering the depths of my spite. The glass was too thick, too clear, and too tall. It was a literal, unmoving testament to her own ridiculous demand. She now had the perfect view of my yard. But she had lost the war on the terms of cost, effort, and sheer absurdity. "You're mad," she finally managed. "No, Karen," I said, putting my other hand on the glass and leaning in, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that she probably couldn't hear, but could certainly read on my lips. "I'm broke, and I'm about to get paid." She sputtered, unable to find the words to complain about a transparent fence that she herself had suggested. She turned on her heel, marching back toward her mansion, leaving me alone with my magnificent, ludicrous, and wildly expensive wall of truth. The only problem? My bank account was now functionally a ghost town. The bulletproof glass was up, but I was living on borrowed time and maxed-out credit cards. I needed cash. And I had a 50-foot-tall, high-security display window to work with. List of immediate, overwhelming concerns. Credit card debt, looming like a storm cloud. The HOA. Karen was on the board. A violation letter was incoming. The ramen budget, already shrinking. The glass, too pristine. It needed an attraction. It was time to get creative. If I was going to be broke, I was going to be the most visible broke guy in the neighborhood. The glass fortress was up. It was magnificent. It was also a monument to my financial ruin. I was staring at a 6-figure debt secured by a barrier that primarily served to stop a theoretical enemy I didn't have, while the very real enemy, Karen, was safely on the other side, contemplating my demise. I needed money, and I needed it fast. I walked along the 50-foot stretch of pristine, perfect transparency. If this thing was going to bankrupt me, it damn well needed to pay for itself. That's when the inspiration hit me. It wasn't just a fence. It was the largest, most pointless display case in the entire state. And what do you do with a premium display case? You charge admission. I ran inside, grabbed a cheap whiteboard I usually used for grocery lists, and a set of multicolored markers. I channeled my inner carnival barker and drafted the official signage for my new enterprise. The sarcastic idea. This wasn't a business, it was performance art. I wasn't charging people to see my yard, I was charging them to appreciate the structural integrity of the installation, and more importantly, to witness the visible agony of my neighbor. I taped the sign to a thin, non-bulletproof, and therefore highly symbolic wooden stake right next to the glass. It read, "Alex's Architectural Transparency. Exhibit a celebration of uninterrupted visual harmony, as demanded by local stakeholders. Admission pricing. Basic glimpse, 1-minute viewing. $2, selfie allowed, no flash. The Structural Integrity Appreciation Package, 5 minutes. $5, includes a complimentary tap on the glass to feel the thunk. The Premium View of Vengeance, Gold Package, 10 minutes. $10, guaranteed viewing of the neighbor's reaction. Timing dependent on drama, comes with a complimentary packet of instant ramen. The VIP Karen Special, $50. Private viewing during peak confrontation times. Requires 24-hour advance warning to properly stage the lighting. Pay via Venmo QR code above. No cash. I refuse to touch money that Karen might have touched. Disclaimer. Bulletproofing is for the glass, not for my sanity. I stepped back, admiring my work. It was magnificent. It was ridiculous. It was 100% compliant with Karen's demand for a transparent barrier. The first person to approach the exhibit wasn't a disgruntled art student or a local architecture buff. It was a kid, maybe 12 years old, riding a scooter. He saw the sign and stopped dead. "Dude, what is this?" he asked, popping a wheelie. "It's the future of suburban fencing," I replied, leaning casually against the glass. He read the sign, pulled out his phone, scanned the QR code, and I immediately got a Venmo notification. 2,000 received from Scooter Kid 987. "For the glass thing, LOL." He took a quick selfie with the towering, invisible barrier, flashed me a thumbs up, and scooted off. Profit, $2. Cost of glass, $99,998 to go. Not exactly an aggressive return on investment, but it was a start. The trickle of customers began. It was mostly locals on their afternoon walks, fascinated by the sheer audacity of the structure and the hilarious sign. They weren't paying for the view. They were paying for the story. My daily routine shifted. I started spending my afternoons in the backyard, wearing a bright red polo shirt that designated me as the curator of the exhibit. I'd point out key features of the yard. "And here, folks," I'd say to a small group of confused elderly neighbors, gesturing dramatically at my rusty grill, "we have the centerpiece, the failing infrastructure of the American dream. Notice the chipping paint and the sheer desperation in the char marks. Truly profound. List of key attractions people actually paid to see. The sunbather's glimpse, me reading a paperback in a cheap lawn chair, a surprising hit. The bulletproof guarantee, I'd charge an extra $1 just to let them try to leave a smudge on the glass. They failed. The pacing neighbor, guaranteed view of Karen pacing furiously inside her house, only available during peak, I need to talk to the HOA hours. Within a week, I was averaging about $75 a day. Not bank-breaking, but enough to upgrade from instant ramen to the microwavable cups. Progress. The success, however minor, was intolerable to Karen. She watched the stream of people, the steady ping of my Venmo notifications echoing the death knell of her perfect neighborhood vision. She had tried everything. Loud music, passive-aggressive gardening, even leaving a strongly worded HOA violation note taped to the outside of the glass, which I promptly used as a prop in the View of Vengeance package. She finally did the one thing I knew she would. She called the authorities. I was mid-sentence, describing the tragic beauty of my wilting petunias to a tourist from New Jersey, when 2 police cruisers rolled up and stopped dead on the curb. Officer Bob and Officer Rodriguez stepped out. Officer Bob was large, weary, and looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Officer Rodriguez was young, alert, and trying desperately not to smile. "Sir," Officer Bob sighed, adjusting his belt, "we received a rather unusual complaint. Something about an unlicensed commercial activity, a peep show, and a public nuisance via excessive transparency?" I adopted my most innocent, law-abiding expression. "Officer, I have no idea what you mean by peep show. Everything here is above board. We're an architectural transparency exhibit." Officer Bob blinked. "An exhibit?" "Yes, sir. My neighbor, the lovely lady in the third-floor sunroom who thinks her view is an insured asset, demanded a transparent boundary. I provided one. I invested my life savings into providing an aesthetically pleasing, ballistic-grade, transparent structure. People, as you can see, I gestured to the small group, who were now furiously snapping photos, are simply paying a nominal fee to appreciate the structural integrity and the sheer audacity of the material science involved. Officer Rodriguez coughed, a little too loudly, into his shoulder. Officer Bob pulled out his notepad. Mr. Alex, where is your permit for running a commercial attraction on residential property? Ah, officer, you misunderstand the classification, I countered, pulling out the official-looking yet entirely fabricated exhibit charter I'd typed up that morning. The fence is a permanent structure, compliant with the height restrictions for a decorative barrier. The exhibit itself is not a business. It's a spontaneous, crowd-funded sociological performance art piece. I'm not selling a product. I'm accepting voluntary donations for the curation of Insanas. Experience! I held up the sign. It says admission, not price of sale. It's a fine line in the eyes of the IRS, I'm sure. But here, in the eyes of the law, I am simply a man, sharing his extremely expensive clear fence with the community. Officer Bob rubbed his temples, which I assumed meant he was battling a migraine induced by bureaucratic absurdity. So, you're saying you're charging people to look at a wall? No, sir. I am charging them to look at the result of a neighborly dispute resolved through extreme capital investment. It's a cautionary tale, officer. We're educational. Karen, sensing the tide turning, flung open her front door and strode onto her lawn, radiating pure, unadulterated fury. She pointed a trembling finger at me, then at the glass. Officer! He's lying! He's attracting undesirables! Look at the sign! He's mocking me! He's charging people to watch me! This was the climax. It was a standoff between three key pillars of suburban authority: the police, the HOA queen, and the man who spent a fortune on glass to win a petty war. Officer Bob looked at Karen, then at the thick, utterly silent glass wall separating them, then back at me. I gave him a non-committal shrug and pointed to the Bulletproof guarantee line on my sign. Ma'am, Officer Bob said, turning to Karen, he's not operating a business that generates loud noise or traffic obstruction. He's not selling goods. He appears to have installed a fence that, while unusual, seems to meet the demand for transparency. And while the language on the donation request is provocative, it's not illegal to ask for money to look at your own property. He paused, looking genuinely bewildered. We can't cite him for excessive transparency, ma'am. There's no law against having a clear wall. Karen sputtered, trying to come up with a violation. But the size, it's too tall. We checked the zoning laws, ma'am, Officer Rodriguez interjected helpfully, trying not to laugh. It's 6 feet, within the limit for a detached barrier. He even has the required setbacks. Officer Bob closed his notepad, defeated. Mr. Alex, as long as you keep the traffic flow moving and don't set up, say, a petting zoo or a hot dog stand that requires a health permit, we can't do anything. We are not the Ministry of Good Taste. Have a good day. As the officers walked away, Officer Rodriguez subtly paused, pulled out his phone, scanned the QR code, and I immediately got a notification. 5 buzz received from Officer Rod. Structural integrity appreciation. The sound of Karen's defeated wail as the police left was music to my ears. A sweet, sweet melody that almost made the loan worth it. I turned to the remaining customers. Folks, I announced, pointing toward Karen's rapidly closing door. That, right there, was a priceless moment of sociological performance. Today's show has ended. Thank you for appreciating the view of vengeance. Don't forget to tip your curator. The police encounter was the best marketing I could have asked for. Karen calling the cops on the architectural transparency exhibit only fueled the narrative, turning me from a petty homeowner into a local folk hero. The David who fought Goliath, Goliath being a woman in expensive athleisure wear. The story, predictably, went viral. It started small. A local blogger, Suburban Snark, wrote a post titled, "Fence War Ends in 100K Bulletproof Victory." That brought in the curious. Then the local news showed up. Channel 7. Action News sent a reporter named Brenda and a camera crew. They set up right on the curb, aiming their lens squarely at my glass wall and, naturally, capturing Karen's rapidly wilting hydrangeas in the background. Brenda stuck a microphone in my face. "Alex, what is your motivation for installing this massive, high-security glass barrier?" I leaned into the camera, maintaining my cheerful, slightly unhinged persona. Motivation, Brenda? It's simple. It's an act of architectural compliance mixed with a profound celebration of the First Amendment, the right to have a truly baffling, expensive fence. I call the attraction the view of vengeance. I then delivered the punchline, looking directly into the camera. And since the glass is so transparent, and since my emergency fund is so empty, I figured, why not share the view? For a small donation, of course. Come appreciate the sheer spectacle of suburban spite. The segment aired at 6 p.m. The next day, I had people driving in from 3 counties over. The Venmo notifications were coming in so fast, my phone had a seizure and rebooted twice. I was selling so many $10 premium View of Vengeance tickets that I actually had to start a queue along the sidewalk. I was now a small-time, glass fence-related entrepreneur. Karen, meanwhile, was losing her mind and, critically, her control. Her house was now the permanent backdrop to a popular, highly visible joke. She tried everything to disrupt the exhibit, but the glass was an impenetrable, transparent shield against her pettiness. Karen's list of failed retaliation tactics. The comedy section. The sonic assault. She started playing incredibly loud classical music toward the glass. Specifically, dramatic opera, the kind that makes you feel like you should be wearing a cape and weeping into a velvet handkerchief. I responded by playing aggressive 80s synth pop, thereby creating a sonic nightmare battle only a few feet from her porch. Customers actually paid extra for the sonic battle package. The early morning vandalism attempt. At 3:15 a.m. one Tuesday, she came out with a massive bucket of dark, brownish-red paint, clearly intending to finally block the view. She probably thought it would ruin the exhibit. I saw her on my security camera feed, and instead of calling the cops, I simply turned on my new, strategically placed motion sensor floodlights. She froze, panicked by the sudden illumination, and dropped the paint, which splattered only on her side of the lawn, creating a horrifying dark stain that looked like a crime scene. She had ruined her own grass. She retreated, defeated, in her fuzzy pink slippers. The strategic sprinkler attack. She set up 3 industrial sprinklers aimed directly at the glass, hoping to obscure the view with constant water jets. I waited 5 minutes for the crowd to gather, walked out in board shorts, set up a beach chair, and opened an umbrella. I then loudly announced, "Folks, you've hit the jackpot. Welcome to the Tropical Rainforest Vengeance Package. Enjoy the cooling mist. Only $2 extra for the full sensory experience." She turned the sprinklers off immediately. She was feeding the attraction. My revenue stabilized. I was officially making more money from the fence than I had anticipated making at my actual job for the next month. I was even able to pay off the first huge chunk of the loan. I decided it was time to make a capital improvement. The problem? At night, the exhibit disappeared. It was just a black hole. I called up an electrician with a new project. I wanted dimmable, color-changing LED lighting strips installed along the base and top of the glass, shining upward, turning the wall into a massive, lit-up spectacle at night. The electrician, a deadpan guy named Mark, who communicated mostly in shrugs and eye rolls, came over. "You want to light up the giant bulletproof wall," Mark summarized, staring at the sheer absurdity. "Correct," I affirmed. "I want the nighttime illumination spectacular package. I want it to be mood-setting, like a disco but for structural appreciation." Mark squinted at the glass. "You know, this wall could stop a tank. But you want me to wire up some party lights on it. This is why I quit working for rich people. They just have weirder problems." He didn't complain, though. He just worked. He installed the hidden strips, wired the dimmer, and installed a custom remote control. "So, what colors?" Mark asked, testing the switch. "Every color," I said, "but primarily Karen-repellent blue, and maybe a nice aggressive vengeance red for special events." When Mark was done, I stood back and flipped the switch. The 50 feet of glass lit up in a slow, pulsing sequence of deep blue and crimson. It was stunning. It was ridiculous. It was a beacon of pettiness visible from the freeway. "That'll be $300, Mark said. "But I'm also going to charge you an extra $50 for the story. I'm telling my kids about this." I paid him in cash, derived directly from the sale of View of Vengeance tickets. The cycle was complete. The nighttime illumination spectacular was the final blow. My exhibit was now a 24-hour spectacle. My life was absurd, but I was debt-free, or at least less debt-ridden, and undeniably victorious. The local news, sensing the story was still active, returned for a follow-up piece. This time, they didn't just interview me. They demanded a comment from the local stakeholder. The camera crew caught Karen in her front yard, trimming a bush with a pair of shears that looked suspiciously like large scissors. She was defeated. The anger had curdled into a visible, permanent state of exhaustion. Brenda, the reporter, walked up to her, microphone ready. "Karen, many people are calling this glass wall a symbol of fighting back against petty neighborhood disputes. You initially requested a transparent barrier. What is your comment now on the architectural transparency exhibit?" Karen looked at the towering, pulsing blue glass wall, then at the cheerful line of people snapping photos, then at me, the curator, waving at the camera. She opened her mouth, but only a strangled, pathetic noise came out. She sputtered, inhaled sharply, and then mumbled something that sounded like, "I prefer the wood." And that was it. That was the surrender. The queen of the HOA had admitted, on live television, that she preferred the plain, 3-foot wooden fence she had fought so hard to remove. She shuffled back inside, defeated by her own words and my incredible willingness to spend money out of spite. I turned the camera back toward the glass, pulling the gold package ramen out of my pocket. "And there you have it, folks," I said, holding up the cheap ramen. "The moral of the story isn't about fences. It's about taking ridiculous advice and running with it, all the way to the bank." I then summarized my financials and my personal growth for the camera and, more importantly, for the audience at home. I used the profits from the View of Vengeance to pay for the entire cost of the bulletproof glass installation. Yes, every cent of the loan is gone, thanks to people paying to watch my neighbor fume. The electrician and the disco lights, because victory should be well lit. A new, ridiculously comfortable patio chair. The old one was rusted, a true visual tragedy. A lifetime supply of artisanal coffee to sip while watching Karen, who now refuses to use her sunroom, stare blankly out of her kitchen window. The exhibit has scaled down a bit now. I don't need the money anymore. The lines are gone, but I keep the sign up, and every now and then I get a Venmo from a passing tourist. It's passive income, courtesy of Karen's ego. I lean back in my new, luxurious patio chair, sipping my expensive coffee. I look through the 1.5 inch of perfectly clean glass at Karen's kitchen, where she's staring intently at a magazine, pointedly ignoring my existence. The glass is lit with a soft, celebratory golden hue. So what did I learn? Don't let your neighbor tell you what to do with your fence. And if they do, remember, there's always a loophole, preferably one made of very, very thick glass that you can monetize. It's about boundaries, you see. And sometimes, to really establish a boundary, you have to build a spectacular, high security attraction that uses your neighbor's own misery as the main draw. I finish my coffee, smile, and address you, the reader, one final time. I'm done with fences for now, but I was thinking. Karen just got a new solar panel array on her roof. She keeps complaining that the squirrels are chewing the wires. I wonder if I could charge admission for a drone show that teaches squirrels about electrical safety.